you do not need to live in a blue zone latitude to enjoy the benefits of longevity. You can set your life up so that you're doing these things or proxies for them wherever you're living. And, everybody listening to me, the average person listening to me right now, look in my eyes, you should be able to live to age 92 or 93. And it starts with eating a plant-based diet, whole plant-based foods.
This week's podcast is sponsored by Vivo Barefoot shoes. We've been wearing them for 6 years and genuinely they are our favourite shoes, and that is all we wear beyond being barefoot.
Yeah, they're really, really great. They've tons of different varieties. You get 15% off with the code HAPPYPEAR15.
And if you don't like them, what do you do, Dave?
You can send them back within 100 days. So if you're interested, vivobarefoot.com, and the code is HAPPYPEAR15.
Welcome, Dave and Steve here, and we are delighted to have you aboard. Today we've got a really special episode with you.
This is someone who we've admired for a long period of time, and someone whose work has influenced our work massively. Like, we've been given corporate talks for years, and we will pretty much always without fail talk about the blue zones, because the blue zones is so
interesting and relevant. And so today's talk is with Dan Buettner. He's the founder of Blue Zones, which is the 5 areas in the world where there was the longest living people. And Dan partnered with National Geographic, and he went and found with cartographers, I think he called them.
demographers.
Oh, demographers. That was, they got all the census of the world, and they were finding out where the longest living people were. And then they went in and they researched and they got all the data of how do these people live such long lives? And that was one part of his research. And then he went off and did the blue zones of happiness, trying to understand where were the happiest people in the planet and how were their lifestyle factors. So fascinating bodies of work. He's also an incredible man that also has 3 Guinness World Records for ultra endurance cycling. Written lots of #1 New York Times best-selling books.
An all-round super cool, inspiring human. And one of the main messages that I got was the importance of environmental design.
Yeah, and that sounds kind of crazy, but he said it's not about willpower, it's not about motivation. We are all products of our environment. And he said with a lot of the longest living people, they simply are because their environment, the healthy choices, the easy choices. So that was fascinating anyway.
Anyway, we don't want to tell too much more about it. It was a fabulous conversation. Dan is such an inspiring man. Thank you again for all the feedback you've been giving us on social media. And please, this is part of our series on community and how to build resilient communities, because this is something that in this day and age, community, even in the blue zones, community is one of the most important factors for longevity, for happiness and a sense of belonging.
Yes, genuinely. So buckle up. Here we go. Dan Buettner. Woohoo! Enjoy and let us know what you think. So for anyone listening who doesn't know about the blue zone, so we've read your books, we've listened to every talk, we know all about it. But for anyone listening that doesn't really know about the blue zones, what it is, or could you bring anyone up to date who's listening that might not know about it?
So it started out as a National Geographic project to reverse engineer longevity. So there's something called the Danish twin study that established that only about 20% of how long the average person lives is dictated by our genes. The other 80% is something else. So our way of finding out what that other 80% was to hire demographers. These are people who are good at measuring populations and different characteristics of population. But we're specifically interested in finding the statistically longest lived areas in the world. And this was a huge job. It took us about 2.5 years to go through all the world's census data for the last 100 years and to pinpoint these areas. And we found them in the longest lived men in the highlands of Sardinia, longest lived women in Okinawa, Japan, in Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula. We found the lowest rate of middle-aged mortality. An island in Greece called Ikaria, we found 10,000 people who are living about 8 years longer than Americans are, with a fractional rate of heart disease and about 1/10 the rate of dementia, which is really interesting. So they're living a long time and staying sharp until the very end. And so once you find these places, then the next step, these are areas that have achieved the outcomes that we want. So they live a long time and they avoid the diseases that are crushing our economies and causing so much pain and suffering. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, dementia, several types of avoidable cancers. So these people aren't getting these diseases. So then we set about a different sort of branch of science to find out what these people are doing, or what are the behaviors, the population-wide behaviors that correlate with these long-lived populations. And remarkably, no matter where we go, we see essentially the same behaviors and environmental characteristics in place. It's just shocking how you could be on Okinawa on one side of the world and Costa Rica on the other side of the world, and the same puzzle pieces are in place. So what my books, Blue Zones, Blue Zone Solution, Blue Zones Kitchen, what they do is they endeavor to identify what those puzzle pieces are and then put them in place so that people do the right things and avoid the wrong things for long enough. And this is key, so they don't develop the disease that will foreshorten their lives. And the big insight is that people in blue zones don't try to change their behavior. They live in an environment where the healthy choice is the easy choice. And the value proposition for everybody listening is about 10 extra years. In Ireland's probably 12 extra years. You could be living 12 extra years and look like the happy pair with just as much energy as they have. And by the way, is the happy pair a double entendre on the fact that you guys are pair brothers? You know,
and we started a fruit and veg shop.
That was obvious to everybody else but me. I was very last to figure that out. But
no, you did well.
Myself.
Well done.
So that's the nickel version of the dollar question.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're mentioning the environment, because so much of modern day society is put down to the individual. It's put down to willpower. It's put down to like, if you don't succeed, it's your fault. Whereas it's beautiful you saying that it's the environment. It's the context is so conducive to our longevity and also conducive to our happiness.
And also a bit like you can even use that analogy back to plants. You can put a certain plant in one type of soil and it doesn't thrive at all. I see it in my house, in the house plants. I put certain house plants in the direct sunlight. They don't do well. I find them a nice shady kind of damp spot in the corner of the house and it thrives there. So my house isn't damp.
Of course not, Dave.
Of course not. But it's the same.
A good analogy. But yeah, I somewhat disruptively, I say that if you're overweight in America and probably Ireland, it's probably not your fault. And I cite for support of that statement that if you go back to the 1980s in this country, you had about a third as many people who were obese and about a seventh of as many people were suffering from type 2 diabetes. Now you start asking yourself, so back in the 80s, did they have better diets? No. Better exercise programs? No. Better supplements? No. Were people better people with greater discipline back then? No. What's changed? Well, what's changed is there's about 20 times more fast food restaurants than there were in the 1980s. There are about, we drive about 60% more miles. So we've had to spend 60% more time in our automobiles instead of on our feet. A full 48% of all retail outlets in America. And I'm not just talking about convenience stores. I'm talking about places, pharmacies, and I guess you call them chemists, and places that you would get your tires changed, all have junk food. So we're genetically hardwired to crave fat and sugar and salt and take rest whenever we can. And that's okay when you live in an environment of hardship and scarcity like we have for 99% of human existence. But now you throw that same genetic makeup into this cesspool of burgers and fries and sodas and pizzas and packaged snacks and sweets. And your genetics are going to win out all day long. I like to think I'm a disciplined person. I'm sure you guys are disciplined too, but at a certain point for the vast majority of people, the genes are going to win out over discipline, and we're going to grab that candy bar or be so hungry we're going to eat that burger. And the secret is not expecting, like in my country, 330 million Americans to somehow find the discipline and focus of mind to do the right thing for, the next 50 years. That the easier solution is set people up for success and shape their homes and their social networks. And, my business is shaping people, the cities that we live in. So the healthier choice is not only the easier choice, but it's the unavoidable choice. And that's what we see in blue zones in Sardinia and Okinawa and so forth. And that's going to be the key to reshaping our communities so that people are eating healthier, moving more, living their purpose, and socializing the right way.
I love that.
Wow. And I know that, like, as Stephen said, there was 9 lifestyle factors. And the one which you kind of come back to time and time again, which is so prevalent and relevant nowadays, is that point of community and the kind of social engagements. And like you've mentioned, now I've listened to a lot of your talks where you talk about that in the blue zones, typically they spend 6 hours a day around other people and in people who they like. Could you talk a bit about the need for community, which you've found in these long living people and their social environments?
So there's 2 levels. There's our immediate social network, and the Okinawans call that a moai, M-O-A-I, moai, which is a committed circle of usually 5 or 6 people who are there for each other throughout their lives. And that turns out to be super important, not only as a sort of safety net if you run out of money or you run into trouble or you just need someone to talk to, but I'm sure you've heard the often cited research that shows that lonely people who don't have at least 2 or 3 friends they can count on a bad day, their life expectancy is as much as 8 years lower than people who are connected. So what does this all mean? What's the prescriptive here? The prescriptive is to build a social circle around yourself very carefully, because we know that health behaviors are measurably contagious. If your 3 best friends are obese and unhealthy, there's a 150% chance that you'll be overweight yourself. Alcoholism, drug use, happiness, even loneliness is contagious. So you want to make sure to build this moai, your own circle of people you're spending face-to-face time with, of people whose idea of recreation is playing tennis or walking or gardening, people who you can count on a bad day. Bad stuff happens to everybody. And people lose their spouse, and a parent dies, and a child gets sick, and you lose your job. And we all have plenty of friends who are best friends if we have extra money and you're buying them a pint and you're happy, but when the life hits the skins, are they still around? So making sure you have friends that will support you when, you can call up and cry, or you can call up and complain and they'll actually care. And then finally, I think it's really important to have at least one, if not a few, vegans or vegetarians in your immediate social network, which is, by the way, way better than getting on some diet. If you look at the recidivism curves of diets, they work for about 7 months for 90% of people, and they fail for almost everybody within 2 years. But if you make friends with the happy Pear, every time they come over to your house, they're going to make sure you're cooking for some plant-based food for them. When you go to their house, they're going to cook some delicious stuff from one of their happy Pear cookbooks. You're going to be introduced to this healthy food. It's not ramrodded down your throat, or you don't have to do it out of guilt, or I'm going to say the environment. You're going to do it because it tastes good. And whenever you go out to eat with the happy Pear, you can bet it's going to be at a restaurant that's going to have some delicious plant-based food. You don't have to think about it. All you have to do is be friends with the happy Pear, and you're naturally going to up your vegetable consumption. So that's super important. I know that was a long answer to a simple question.
No, that was very detailed, and I really appreciate it. And in terms of, I've heard before mention the importance of loose social interactions as well. Like, it's obviously community, there's many different facets of it, but often, community is seen as our close group of friends, but often the importance of a sense of belonging to the wider community, the sense of saying hello to the person who walked by, the sense of saying hello to someone who make your coffee, that this is equally important to our sense of longevity too.
Did you find that in the Blue Zones?
What's that?
Did you find that in the Blue That
well,
kind of
absolutely. Well, you find so it makes a huge point. There's a famous TED talk on that, but this is largely a function of environment. If you live in some soulless suburb where the only way to get to your coffee shop or a store is to get in your car, which is usually in your garage, and drive there, as opposed to, my neighborhood, it's laced with sidewalks. In fact, this morning I biked with a friend to our local coffee shop. I bumped into 3 or 4 people and who I kind of know and said hello, or they know me. And I didn't have to plan for it. I didn't have to, put it on my Outlook calendar, make 4 new connections this week. I just went to coffee. So it's so important. A lot of people, they probably feel stuck in their homes. But, I wrote this book, Blue Zones of Happiness, and a cover story for National Geographic on the topic. And we found that when it comes to happiness, which is just another facet of health, that the most powerful thing you can do to increase your happiness is, if you're unhappy, is move to a happier place. And the evidence I suggest to support that is, if you follow unhappy people from places like Africa or Southeast Asia, or places in South America that are poor, as they move to Canada, which is one of the top 5 happiest places, within 1 year, their age doesn't change much. Their education level doesn't change much. Their marital status usually doesn't change. Their faith status doesn't change. Their sexual orientation doesn't change. But within 1 year, they're reporting the happiness level of their adoptive home. So they're all of a sudden the top 10 or top 5 happiest people in the world. And sometimes this means a doubling of their happiness. They did nothing but move. So this just goes to reinforce this notion that if you want to be healthier or happier, don't try to change your mind or your environment. I mean, that's, it's fun to try to do, and you feel like, okay, I'm doing something. But the important thing to do is change your environment. Don't try to change your mind or your behavior. Change your environment.
So, and this is something which I wondered with that. So say example, I'm living in some suburb and it's an urban jungle and I don't feel very fulfilled in it, and I'd like to be. How would I go about making a decision of understanding which is a happier place? Is a happier place more urban? Is it more rural? Is it beside the sea? Is it beside the mountains? Is it beside rich people? Is it beside poor people? How would I make this decision if I wanted to move somewhere which was happier?
I can partially answer that from U.S. data. So you're more likely to be happy if you live in a place where you're not more than a half a kilometer from a park or a green space. You're more likely to be happy if a neighborhood has sidewalks, it has a healthy food environment. You're more likely to be happy if you live near water, either at a river, lake, or the ocean. People live near water report about 10% greater happiness, controlling for everything else. You're more likely to be happy if you live in a university town as opposed to a suburb. There's a couple types of happiness. There's one type of happiness is evaluative happiness. Or life satisfaction. That's how you look back in your life and how satisfied are you with the big picture. I have a successful, happy, pure business. My brother's a good pal of mine. We have good families. We're great. And then there's this experienced happiness or affect happiness, which is how we experience our life from day to day, moment to moment. And they're actually often very different things. Like billionaires tend to say, yeah, I'm really happy with my life. But then you look at the minutia of their day, and it kind of sucks because they're worried about their troublesome spouse or their portfolio, which might be collapsing, or all the skeletons in their closet from, making that $1 billion. So when it comes to that life satisfaction happiness, people who live in big cities tend to have more life satisfaction. But people who live in rural agricultural communities, they tend to have better day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience. So it kind of depends what kind of happiness you want.
Very good, because I remember listening to you talk about Cartago in Costa Rica. So when we started the Happy Pear as a vegetable shop, we used to go to the fruit market every morning at 4:30 a.m. and it was people trading, and it was such a subculture that was so much fun, and there was so much messing and it was so much lifting boxes.
And for us, it was one of the most happiest times, running around two exuberant lunatics, so excited with vegetables and fruit.
Vegetables to sell for the day's trade. And I remember you talked about this place, Cartago in Costa Rica, and this one market center where people were trading and buying and selling like vegetables or something. And it just reminded me of that. And I wondered, you talked about like Costa Rica being more happier on a day-to-day basis versus Singapore, where it was more happiness in
Very
the rear
good
view mirror.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and Costa Rica produces more happiness per GDP dollar. There's some correlation between wealth and happiness in nations. That Costa Rica does a better job with a little bit of money at creating a happy population than any place else in the world. And my articles are really statistical based. So what are the things you can do to stack the deck in favor of happiness? I'm not going to give you a silver bullet, but I am going to give you aces to put in your deck of cards, so you're better at playing blackjack or 21. So, but National Geographic's way of telling stories is you find places and people to use as your character, and then you sort of metabolize the research into these characters, and use the character as the delivery vehicle. So we found a avocado salesman in that market in Cartago, Costa Rica, who had the profile of the statistically happiest man in the world. And we knew he would be married. We knew he would have children. We knew that he would have religion. We knew that he'd be healthy. We knew that he would spend 6 to 7 hours a day engaged in social interaction. We knew these things all stack in favor of happiness. And then because Cartago was the happiest place in Costa Rica, which is the happiest country when it comes to this day-to-day moment-to-moment happiness, we use that market as ground zero of the happiest place in the world. And indeed, much the way you experienced it, you walk in and people are joking, they're socially interactive, they're around healthy food, which doesn't hurt, they're physically active, they're lifting their crates, they're keeping their brains sharp by commerce. So you bring all these things together and you get, really almost a smoothie of joy, for lack of a better metaphor.
That's gas, because I remember back about maybe 10 years ago, we used to make smoothies at these tech events. There was this tech event in Dublin called Dublin Web Summit, and we used to make smoothies at it for people at it. And at one stage we were asked to make smoothies at this event called Founders, which was all the kind of elite tech people. So there was founders of, YouTube and Skype and all these very successful people. I remember we were making smoothies there and we were chatting to some successful tech person, and he was saying, it was your man who started Bebo. It was Michael, can't remember his name. But he said to us, well, you guys are ahead of the curve. He says, like, essentially a lot of these billionaires, they'll make all their money and then they'll start either an food shop,
organic food business.
They'll start an organic food business. And he says, that's what you guys are already doing. Like, just enjoy it. Like, you've saved yourself making a tech company. And I remember really laughing at it and thinking,
you're not, that's not true.
That's not true.
But that was,
and we went a different way, but it was.
Dan, there's something I'd love to ask you on just in terms of blue zones, in terms of longevity. They all seem to be around equatorial regions and around where the weather is quite conducive to spending time outside and conducive to more, plant-based foods growing. Does weather have any aspect to do with it? Because we live up a little bit more north of that. And I was just curious from a selfish reason.
Yeah, they actually don't live around the equator. They live at about the 20th parallel. So they're maybe subtropical. And people live around the equator. They often, partially, I think mostly because of climate, they're shorter lives because of infectious diseases like malaria and cholera and even just diarrhea. But these places seem to live far enough north that they can have a pretty healthy environment, but also have 3 growing seasons a year. So they can have a garden year round. Having a garden is really important longevity, I would say, insight, because it nudges you out into to move for an hour or two every day. It's typically range of motion. It immeasurably lowers stress hormones. And you emerge from the activity with vegetables that you're going to eat, presumably, because, you grew them. And so that's really important. Also, the most important source of vitamin D is in the sun, just 20 minutes in quality sunshine, which you guys only get from June through August because you're so far north. But in blue zones, you have quality sun 12 months a year. And just exposing your arms and your legs with short pants for 20 minutes, you get more vitamin D than you would drinking a gallon of milk. And vitamin D is really important because it combines with calcium to help keep your bones strong through life. And broken bones and falls are one of the top 5 killers of older people. So, so it's a sum of lots of subtle things that come with living at the 20th parallel or subtropical that favors them. That said, you do not need to live in a blue zone latitude to enjoy the benefits of longevity. You can set your life up so that you're doing these things or proxies for them wherever you're living. And, everybody listening to me, the average person listening to me right now, look in my eyes, you should be able to live to age 92 or 93. And it starts with eating a plant-based diet, whole plant-based foods.
Beautiful.
I like that, Dan. I like that. Look into my eyes.
I love it. That's great fun. Really genuinely is. Yeah, mesmerizing. Okay, I'd love to move on to now the environmental aspect, because I know your recent work over the last 10 years has been on Blue Zones Project, which has been about trying to apply the principles which you've learned in these environments. And as you said, it's about if we can put ourselves in the right environment, we're going to make the healthy choice. So could you give a quick intro about what Blue Zones Project is, how you've gone about it, and some of the successes of it?
So the key idea, once again, is if you want a population to be healthier, you're never going to convince a city of 1 million people to agree on what's a healthy diet or to get them out and exercise every day or any of that. So rather than try to change people's mind, we optimize their environment. So the 4 pillars of Blue Zones are, if you boil them all down, boil those 9 down even farther, we essentially set out to nudge people to move more, to eat less overall, and within that less, they're eating more whole food, plant-based, whole plants, essentially. We want them to socialize more with the right people, and we want them to, know their sense of purpose and live out their sense of purpose. So we go about setting up environments so people naturally do more of those 4 things. Well, how do we do that? Well, if we go into a city, the whole city government has to agree to us coming in and agree to support. So we audition cities. We don't show up. The cities cannot pay us $1 billion to do Blue Zone City unless we can go in and talk to the superintendent of schools, the chief of police, the city council, the mayor, the Chamber of Commerce, the big CEOs, and say, look, we're bringing a team in here, are experts at shaping this environment so the healthy choice is the easy choice. If you can demonstrate that you're in favor of this, we'll come in. So once we know they're committed, then we bring in a team in, and the team has 3 squads. The first squad is a policy squad. And we have aggregated the best practices in food, favoring whole food, plant-based over junk food. The best policies to favor the pedestrian, the cyclist over the motorist, and then to favor the non-smoker over the smoker. And we come in and we don't try to ram these policies down city council's throat, but we say, here's the evidence. We know that these things work to make your city healthier. Let's have a discussion about what would be most effective here and most feasible here. And remember, we're only here for 5 years, and don't waste our time. We won't waste yours. Let's look at these policies and pick the ones that would work best here. And lo and behold, we always find about 8 to 10 policies in each of those 3 areas that the city feels they can bite off. And then we make sure we have a team that stays on them, like a terrier on your pant leg, to make sure that the city actually follows through and implements these policies. So that's actually the most effective way, the most cost-effective way at getting a city healthier. The second team administers Blue Zones certification for schools, restaurants, grocery stores, workplaces, and for churches or mosques or temples. And any one of those places, so we'll have a team that will visit all of them and will give free consulting on how to make your environment healthier, changing the designs and the policies of schools, for example, In schools, we would ask them to have no eating in classrooms and hallways. In restaurants, we would ask them to change the default. Don't automatically put bread and butter on the table, but if people ask for it, give it. Don't automatically fill people's sodas, a glass of soda, but if they ask for it, they can get it, etc. And if these places comply and they do so for 6 months, we give them Blue Zone's approval, Blue Zone certification. And then the third team, over 5 years, will reach 15% of the adult population to sign up Blue Zone's ambassadors. And Blue Zone's ambassadors, they agree to go into their homes, and we give them a checklist on how to optimize their homes so they're eating less and moving more. We're talking about those moais. We actually spend an evening with sometimes 500 people at a time and help them create their own moai. 5 people, 5 committed friends. They're often strangers at the beginning, but for 10 weeks, they're going to walk together or they're going to eat Blue Zone's potlucks to dip. And that's sort of, they get together and they each bring a dish. I don't know if you have the term potluck.
Yeah, I think most people have heard it from TV shows or whatever.
Okay. So we essentially organize them around a healthy eating or moving activity for 10 weeks. And we find that about 70% of those moais stay together. And friends are long-term interventions, and they work much better than diets and getting people healthier. And then finally, we give people a purpose workshop. So many people living in middle America, they're working 55 hours a week. They're tired. They're raising kids. They're spending an hour a day in their cars, and they never really have the opportunity to look inside of themselves and see, well, what am I good at? What do I like to do? And what would be an outlet for my gifts? And we have a really cool process and we do give it for free in our cities. So even the poorest people can come and we'll help them identify their sense of purpose. And many times that is a huge life-changing epiphany. Maybe they won't quit their job, but we get a lot of people who we can immediately point to a volunteer opportunity, or at the very least, help them start doing a hobby that exercises that purpose muscle. And we know that people who have a strong sense of purpose and live that purpose live about 7 years longer than people who are rudderless in life, and they have lower healthcare costs. So it's policy, places, and then people, and we orchestrate this perfect storm over a 5-year period. And we've seen cities' obesity rate drop by as much as 15%. Smoking rate goes down. People report higher levels of happiness or life satisfaction, higher levels of physical activity, higher levels of fruits and vegetable consumption. And in one of our cities recently, Fort Worth, Texas, 1 million people, they reported that we're saving their city $250 million a year in projected healthcare costs. So, we know this approach is working. It goes counter to the way the economics of healthcare works in this country, because in America, people get rich off of sick people. They don't get rich off of healthy people. So pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and doctors, their business plan basically waits around for you to get sick. And the more people get sick, the more customers they have. We're not saying that these are malicious people by any sense, but their business plan really kind of relies on sickness. And the Blue Zone approach, we get paid when we make cities healthier. And it's a very different way of approaching it. And it's been an uphill battle, but it's working.
It's incredible. Really sounds phenomenal. Genuinely in every sense.
I love the sense of this, the simplicity in how you described to help someone find their sense of purpose. What are your gifts? What do you like to do? Go do it, like in essence, which is so simple, but it's something that I guess even through the institution of education that I went through, when I came out at the end of it, I wasn't sure what I was interested in. I didn't really know that I was that interested in food. I left kind of feeling confused. And I'm sure to many people listening, it can be hard in modern day society to know what's your sense of purpose, what's your gifts, and how do you go about sharing that. So are there any tools that you'd have for anyone listening, or any few little tips for anyone listening, how they could, connect in with that sense of their gift and how they would start to live it more?
Well, I'll show you something. It happens to be right here. Actually, I'll show you something. I know this is unusual to go to podcast. Well, your guitar didn't show up very well, but this is a deck of cards. We actually use these. There's a guy named Richard Leider, Lider, who's written several books on purpose. And these cards, I don't know, can you see these?
Yeah, creating trust. Researching things. This is great fun, Dan. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
Discovering resources. Instructing people. Social.
Yeah. So there's 52 of them like this, and we take people through this deck, and we have them just look at each of these cards and think to themselves, would I like doing that? Am I good at doing that? And does it line up with my values? So they sort these cards on those three areas and progressively take out cards that don't fall, that don't satisfy all three of those criteria. And at the end, you usually end up with one or two cards that sum you up. Like it might be, I like to take care of people, or I am good at resolving conflict, or I'm good with the first idea. And just the epiphany of knowing, oh, that thing lines up with what I'm good at, what I like to do, my values. Now I know where to go with either my free time or my professional life on what I should be doing to live out my purpose. And so we've seen people quit their jobs. We've seen people really embrace different charities, really like hurl their lives at them. And people get healthier and get happier.
What's the guy's name again who wrote the
Richard
cards?
Leider.
Richard Leider.
Richard Leider, Lieder. He wrote a number of books, and I know he sells these cards. They're great tools. They're not all that expensive. They're called, even though I'm a Blue Zone guy, I still have to put it's called Journey of Discovery Calling Cards and the Adventure.
That's really
right.
cool.
That's
okay, can I ask a question, Dan? So we live in a little town called Greystones, and we secretly, well, maybe it's not so secret now, but we'd love to kind of help, as a sense of life purpose, to create Greystones to be similar to a Blue Zone, to where, we create an environment where the healthy choice is the easy choice and where people can kind of live long, healthy, happy lives. And obviously listening to you there were 4 basic principles that you said. And number 1 was to create an environment where movement is more conducive, where instead of cars, it's more pedestrian and more cycle lanes. That was one.
Policy was another one. So that means talking to the local government and talking to the councils and involving yourself with that, which is quite difficult unless you've got an organization, I imagine. And then another one was the people going out and giving certification, which is going to businesses and going, hey, well done, you guys are eating healthy or supporting healthy lifestyles. And then the other one was people, which was going empowering people, 15% of the adult population, you said, if they can become ambassadors or something, or that type of thing. Was that it?
Yeah, Blue Zone ambassador. There's a bit of a tipping point. See, if you get 15% of people doing it because they talk to their friends and their neighbors, you create this awareness in the entire population. If you can just get to 15%, that's why it's not realistic in a city of 1 million to get 1 million ambassadors, but it's realistic to get 150,000. And then everybody knows about it. We actually measure, and we usually get about 80% name recognition. And that's important because when you go want to certify a restaurant or a grocery store, you have to have a value proposition for the restaurateur. And if nobody's heard of Blue Zones, you don't get very far with it. But if everybody's talking about Blue Zones because it's ubiquitous and comprehensive, then that certification means something, and it gives the employer, the restaurant owner, the superintendent of schools a reason to work for it. So it's, I find there's been so many of these efforts, these hard, healthy cities or vitality cities, they've all failed. And I find unless you really have a full-time staff of professionals who are trained at a 5-year time horizon, you can almost always get people to jump on the bandwagon for the first few months, but it always runs out of gas. Unless there's a sustained commitment from the city. And by the way, because you pay people a competitive salary and you got to give them an office and retirement, et cetera, you have to raise a good bit of money to make these things work. But I'll tell you what, when they work, they're magic.
Yeah. What are some of the, so you've had Fort Worth, there's a few other ones I can't really remember the name.
There's one in Minnesota, I think, wasn't there?
Minneapolis.
First one, Albert Lee, Minnesota, Los Angeles, beach cities. The whole, I was just there a week and a half ago, the whole island of Hawaii, the whole island of Maui, several communities within Oahu, Naples, Florida is another big one, Erie, Pennsylvania, Klamath Falls, Oregon. We've done 54 of them so far, 15 cities in Iowa. So yeah, it's taken off. I mean, we've hit, like most things, we hit the pause button during the pandemic here because people have shifted their focus from chronic disease to, infectious disease, i.e. the coronavirus. But now they're coming back. They're coming back because, even though in this country, 500,000 people are dying because of the coronavirus virus, about 6 million people will die this year because of avoidable diseases, largely because of the way they're eating. So, and their lack of movement. So, it's a much bigger problem than the pandemic is. At least statistically, right now, we don't know what the pandemic could grow into. But we need to get our focus back on what's really killing people in both of our countries and bankrupting our economies.
Here. I love it. There's one other thing you talk about in town in your Blue Zones projects, which is life radius. And that's like, could you talk a little bit about that in terms of the, like, where we live in terms of our cities and communities?
Yeah. So there's some research that shows that most people spend about 80% of their life within 8 kilometers or 5 miles of their home and workplace. So when we go into a community, we're usually focused on increments of 5-mile radius of in a community. Yeah. So, I mean, if it's a huge place like Fort Worth, we might have 3 life radiuses, but most cities are encompassed by 1 life radius or 8 kilometers across. And so that's the geography in which we do the policy, people, and places, 3-pronged approach at changing the environment.
Amazing. Okay, I've got 2 final questions for you. One is, in yourself personally, what are any changes? Like all this research, you've had decades of Blue Zones, of just incredible experiences. How has all this learnings of living with the longest people, the happiest people, researching them, how has it affected your own personal life?
Well, I was a big meat eater before I started this, and now I'm 99.5% plant-based. I'm a big boy. I very intentionally live in walkable communities in both my places. I've taken the time to truly understand my purpose. My purpose is exploring the traditional peoples of the world and bringing back their wisdom to share with others. That's my kind of life purpose statement. And that's what I've done the last 20 years. I continue to do it today. And, I don't have to think about my next job because I know it's going to be a variant of that. I'm a naturally social person. I know that social connectivity, just any kind of social connectivity, is good for us. So I go out every night. I go do something every night, usually dinner with friends. I have gotten rid of some of the unhealthier people in my immediate social network. I haven't dumped them completely, but I spend less time with them. I eat more beans for sure. And, I downshift through yoga and meditation. I know others do it through church and prayer and so forth, but I do it through yoga and meditation.
Yeah, because you used to be an endurance cyclist that has 3 world records. So, yeah, that's quite a shift. Definitely. Okay. Final question for you. And this is just to make it as most relevant as possible. So could you give, for people listening, like you've given there's loads of nuggets, and for anyone listening, I'm sure they'll dig much more into the Blue Zones work, into all your work. But what would be 3 big take homes for anyone listening that they can apply today or in their life immediately?
Number 1, I would get yourself a high quality, plant-based cookbook. I know you guys have one, right? I have Blue Zones. It doesn't matter what one it is. But the point is, go through that and identify 5 recipes that you think you and your family like, and learn how to cook those. So I'm not saying go out and eat that. I'm saying gain the skills and the gustatory experience of actually finding plant-based food that you'll like. I stumbled on this minestrone. People want the minestrone. They can direct message me at Dan Buettner. I'll send you the. Give me your email. I'll send you the recipe. But there's loads and great recipes. Number 2, I would take stock in your social circle. I would sit down and I'd write out the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I wouldn't necessarily dump the ones that are drinking too much or invite you to the hot dog or hamburger barbecue every night. But I would say proactively getting 2 or 3 people in that immediate social network who are physically active in a way that you like to be physically active, care about you, and eat plant-based. And then the last one, I would say, know your sense of purpose. We talked a little bit about that. It's so important. Get your sense of purpose down to a simple phrase, put it on a Post-it note, put it on your bathroom mirror, look at it every day for a month or so, and start thinking about how you can, either through your professional life, your hobby life, or your charitable life, can have an outlet for your gifts. It makes such a huge difference in not only your happiness. The happiest place in the world, or the happiest people in the world, are volunteering in different ways, but also lower healthcare costs, lower chances of obesity, lower chance of heart disease. It's good in so many ways, and quintessentially blue zones.
Amazing.
I love them.
Even in terms of your purpose there was, as part of this, we're doing a series now on community and how to build more resilient communities. And as part of this, we've interviewed a guy called Bruce Parry, who you might know of. He shot a TV series where he went to 15 different indigenous tribes around the world and lived with them all and got the learnings from that. And now he's starting his own little kind of social experiment, but very interesting and very relevant to your indigenous people and getting the learnings from that. So it might be someone to check out for you.
Perfect. Tell me his name again.
Bruce Parry. Bruce. That's his Bruce, and then Parry, Paurry.
Super
Very
cool,
interesting.
dude. You get on great with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
You guys have a wonderful community around you.
Yeah,
we're blessed. We're very fortunate. And we're fortunate.
But definitely want to learn how to apply more of these Blue Zones project principles, because I think, as you said, your life work is about getting the learnings from indigenous people and bringing it to kind of make it more relevant to modern day. I can't remember exactly how you phrased your purpose, but it was something to that extent.
You had a purpose statement, which I thought was very cool.
Which was
Damn,
really cool.
Buettner, you're very cool.
But definitely, I think ours is related to community and our own immediate different places where we live and how to add value to that. So I think that's something to do with us. So
I love that. You guys are such wonderful dudes, man. I wish we lived close to each other so we could go, share a radish or a pint or something.
Let's share a radish. Eat an apple together. Damn, Buettner, you're wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
I look forward to hanging out in person someday.
Yeah, please, God.
And by the way, if your audience, if any other questions they may have had, if they send me a direct message at Dan Buettner, or I try to post, as you guys do, but I try to post life hacks, how to live longer at Instagram. So.
And then your books, you've amazing books. They're all bestsellers. For anyone
Blue
listening,
Zones of Happiness,
the Blue Zones Project. You've got Thrive is another one.
Let me
Blue
say
Zones Cookbook.
Wow. Okay. So it's Blue Zones Kitchen, which is 100 recipes delivered 100. That's #1 New York Times bestseller. And Blue Zones Solution, which is how to take these Blue Zones principles and permanently put them to work in your life. And then the original Blue Zones, 9 Lessons for Living Longer from the people who live the longest. They've all been New York Times bestsellers. And I put a lot of time, I rattled off 3 books, but it took me 20 years to do the research and write those books. And I'm very proud of them. And I appreciate you guys mentioning them here. And I do believe that they do good for people.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
And by the way, if you don't want to buy, you can go. Most of the stuff is free at bluezones.com too. So you don't have to buy the book, or most of it's out there for free.
One final thing just before we go is that you've inspired us to take that environmental approach. We're doing a project here with a local school here with the teenagers. And instead of just going in and trying to get them to eat healthy, we're doing a month project where we're talking to the teachers, the parents, we're cooking lunch with them, and we're really taking on the environment approach to see for a month how we can positively impact their mental health and their health in terms of movement, in terms of eating more plant-based, in terms of their sleep, and in terms of the amount of time they spend on their phone. Those are the 4 main things we're going to measure. So, but your environmental approach has very much affected us and encouraged us.
I found the most cost-effective way to make a kid's day healthier at school has nothing to do with lunch, because usually you can't do much with lunch on the long term, but no eating in hall rooms and classrooms, hall rooms or classrooms. So the only time they eat is when they come in the morning, their break, and then lunch. And maybe after there's an after school snack or something. Because if there's no eating in hallways and classrooms, you engineer out 8 hours of largely junk food eating. And they don't need that food. And by extension, we also have a couple other really effective policies that you do not reward kids with candy. There's lots of other rewards that you can give, stars or pencils or something. And you don't do fundraisers with candy. You do walkathons and that sort of thing. So it's trying to break this environment of do something good, you get junk food. You know, this which then just carries on to adulthood. You know, I had a hard day at work, I'm going to get a big candy bar. And I think starting that young is so important. And it's actually low-hanging fruit usually.
And what did you do for your kids? Because that's a tough one for kids. Like, even as a parent, I kind of go, oh, it's such an easy one to go, if you go to bed at night, you know.
Well, so in general, I never bring junk food at home. You know, we'll go out, and my kids, my kids aren't vegetarian, but once a week, we'll go get ice cream, or once a week we'll go get pizza or something like that. So, you know, if you just don't bring it into your home, then you can plan for that. Then you eliminate about 60% of the temptation throughout the week. And there is a place to celebrate. There is a place to treat ourselves. I'm not saying Blue Zones isn't about a deprivation diet. It's about, in Blue Zones, they're eating meat, some, and they're drinking, partying like wild people, some, but that's during weddings and, you know, village festivals a few times a month or a year. And there's a place for that. The problem is when it gets to be for breakfast, lunch, and dinner and snacks, like it is in most of America, that's when you get the problem. I'd be interested to hear, how do you get kids off of electronics?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we're embarking on that one, and we're going to start by measuring it and just get them to fill in something every week over the course of the program. Their screen time, you know,
even simple thing like
twice
their phone isn't allowed in the bedroom. That's one simple thing that we're going to try.
It's minimizing it, certainly not eliminating it.
I once went to a dinner party where at the door they gave us what they called cell phone condoms. So it kind of looked like a sock, and we had to put all of our phones in this cell phone condom, and we could use them at the table. You know, we had a dinner where we actually communicated face to face without the, you know, Instagram or Twitter intervening, and it was really quite pleasant. I thought it was clever.
Yes, I like that.
That sort of randy name to it, you know, made people laugh about it. Like
I like that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Will you guys stay in touch if I can ever help? You know where I am, and
likewise, Dan. Likewise, you're fabulous.
Yes, I'm officially requesting that you're in my Malai now. You're my plant-based.
Back at you, Dan.
Right back at you, Dan.
I'm in Miami, or I'll come see you guys at the Happy Pear there in Ireland. All right,
love it.
Cheers, Dan.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
Dan.
Thanks a million.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
What a dude. Really, genuinely, what a dude. He's inspiring man. And I really look forward to hanging out with Dan. What a dude.
Go and eating some radishes with Dan.
Yeah, cool, man. But I love the Blue Zones project idea, the fact that actually they're going into cities and communities and actually helping setting up the environment, which I think is amazing, and something which I'm certainly very curious of how we can apply.
And it's something we've kind of arbitrarily thrown out there. I'd love to try to make Greystones a Blue Zone Day. Shh, don't tell anyone.
Yeah. But as we said, this episode is part of our community series. So if you haven't listened to the other ones, please do check them out. It's a really fun series. We're having so much fun with it. Thanks again for all your feedback on social media. We genuinely appreciate it. Let us know in Instagram stories. Tag us. We'll share it and spread the word.
And please, you're a really important part of this podcast. So please let us know guests you think we should bring on in the future, or topics we should explore. This is the first series of a podcast where we focused about one particular area. And the reason why we chose community is that it's something so dear to our hearts. And we think in terms of modern day society, we can all do with a bit more of a community hug and a sense of togetherness.
Anyway, thanks for your attention. You've made it this far. We're most grateful, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Cheers.